Hello! Welcome back to the World's Worst Teachers. Today's chapter is going to be split into half again, just like Mr. Penceballs, and this one is called Mr. and Mrs Lovey-Dovey and the Sea of Tears. Okay, let's get started. Mr. Lovey had taught English at St. Valentine's School for as long as anyone could remember. He dressed as if all his clothes had been knitted by his elderly mother, which they were. The man was never seen without his knitted tie, cardigan and tweed suit. One day, a new history teacher joined the school. Her name was Miss Dovey. She dressed as if she made her clothes out of old curtains, which she did. The lady favoured floral frocks that went all the way up to her neck and all the way down to her ankles. The pair were made for each other. On her very first day, Miss Dovey was put on break time duty. Mr. Lovey was too. As all the boys and girls of St. Valentine's School played it, these two lovebirds caught their first glimpse of each other. To begin, their shyness prevented them from doing any more than glancing at each other briefly, then looking away. However, soon the looks became longer and longer as they gazed into each other's eyes. Red and brown leaves fell from the trees around them. A gust of wind swirled their hair into the air. Oh, that's really hot. That's really hot. The sound of a dozen violins soared from the music room. Da, 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 da. The famous balcony scene from the most romantic play ever written, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, was being rehearsed in the concert hall. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. In no time their hearts were full to bursting. Neither could resist each other a moment longer. Mr. Lovey and Miss Dovey opened their arms and began rushing towards each other. They scampered across the playground like gazelles, knocking small children out of their way. Oh, ow! Ah! Oh, no! Eventually, the pair embraced. Wallop! Must have just gone like that. They held on to each other tightly. It was as if they had been searching the whole world for all eternity, and now they'd both finally found their soulmate. Such was their joy that they both burst into floods of tears. Yuck! Revolting, isn't it? What could be more vomit-inducing than a teacher in the throes of love? Puke. The answer is simple. 2 teachers in the throes of love. Double puke. That first meeting was only the beginning. Soon, Mr. Lovey was always loitering outside the history classroom to blow a kiss to Miss Dovey. Mwah! Meanwhile, Miss Dovey was always popping into the English classroom to drop off a cup of tea and a slice of her homemade Victoria sponge cake to Mr. Lovey. Clink! Blech. One day, he ended up eating 27 slices and had to be taken to the sick room. In no time, the pair of love-struck teachers were calling out messages of love to each other down the school corridors. "I miss you already, my beautiful rainbow," he would say, even though she'd only been gone for 5 seconds. Spew. "Until break time, my handsome prince of love," she would call back. Up, Chuck. And all the kids at St. Valentine's found the pair puke-tastic. Puke-tastic is a word, just look it up in your Williams dictionary. I wonder if that's his next book. You might be quietly sitting in the library when you'd be caught in the crossfire of one of Miss Dovey's slobbery air kisses aimed at Mr. Lovey. Splat. Or you might be tucking into your lunch when you'd be met with a horrifying sight of Mr. Lovey's face squashed up against the window of the dining hall, gazing lovingly at Miss Dovey. Squelch. Your lunch would end up being sprayed all over the window. Splatter. So far, so bad. However, things took a turn for the worse. Much worser. And, it says worsera, actually. And worsera is a real word that you will find in the world's finest dictionary, the Williams Dictionary. The Williams Dictionary includes it, so it must be real. It is never wrong. I believe it. The teacher's romance blossomed and bloomed and even bloomossomed. And one day, in front of the entire school, Mr. Lovey got down on one knee. Do you need a hand up? Asked Miss Dovey. Not just yet, he replied. Ever since I first laid eyes on you in the playground. There was still quite a lot of chattering from the kids in the dining hall. Please, can I have quiet? I can still hear talking, thank you. The school fell silent. Ever since I did that bit. Miss Dovey, whenever I see you, my heart explodes with joyousness. Please, could you make me the happiest, wappiest man in the world by becoming my wife? Miss Dovey, will you marry me? From his pocket he produced a ring that his mother had knitted and presented it to Miss Dovey. There we are. There's someone being sick in the background. The history teacher burst into floods of tears. Is that a yes? Inquired the English teacher. Miss Dovey couldn't speak, so she just nodded her head and whimpered. Then Mr. Lovey burst into tears as well. He was still down on one knee and beginning to look uncomfortable. Ouch. Actually, please, could you help me up now? My knee's gone numb. The wedding day was set, and the entire school was made to come. The church, which was beside a river, was only a stone's throw from the school, so there was absolutely no excuse. All the girls were forced to wear bridesmaid dresses made out of curtains. Ha ha! Laughed the boys. Although they shouldn't have, as they were forced to wear pink page boy outfits knitted by Mr. Lovey's mother. Ha ha ha! Laughed the girls. Mr. Lovey wore a three-piece powder blue suit, knitted, of course, by his mother. She bawled through the entire service. Meanwhile, Miss Dovey wore an enormous puff of a dress that was fashioned from net curtains. It made her look like a meringue. Although the kids were missing lessons, nothing could be more boring than a marriage service that lasted 9 hours. It was so bum-numbingly lengthy because the groom insisted on reading aloud a 10,000-line love poem that he'd written about his bride. You are the angel of my heart. In front of you, I would not fart. Oh, burp, or scratch my bottom, because you, Miss Dovey, are the one. And that's all that's there. It hasn't got 10,000 lines for me to read out. The bride, meanwhile, had written a 4-hour opera about the groom, which she sang in German. As the wedding guests began to nod off, the weary-looking vicar finally pronounced them man and wife. You are now Mr. and Mrs. Lovey-Dovey. The bride burst into floods of tears. I do hope they are happy, wappy tears, love of my life, inquired the groom. I've never been happier. Seeing his wife cry, Mr. Lovey-Dovey couldn't help but cry too. They cried for a good hour or so. The tears collected in giant puddles on the floor. The vicar looked at her watch and sighed. There's Mr. Lovey-Dovey crying and the vicar looking a bit bored. I'm very sorry, but I've got a christening and then a funeral to get through today, so could you please bog off? Still, the teacher sobbed. I said, bog right off! The vicar lobbed a hymn book at the elderly organist who had fallen asleep. Whoosh! Clunk! Ouch! Upon waking, the organist began playing the wedding march. Da, 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 da. Then, when the pair didn't move, the vicar rolled up the sleeves of her cassock and with all her might, she pushed them out of the church. Bog off! There she is, pushing them out. Everyone at the school breathed a sigh of relief. The longest wedding in the history of the world was finally over. Wrong. It had only just begun. I'm going to leave it there for part 1. What else can happen? I can see where the sea of tears is coming in. I wonder whether that's going to ruin the rest of the wedding. My goodness. All right, see you next time.